Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan, of course, also known as the PC Genie, in case you didn't know that. So, a lot of you, or at least quite a few of you, have requested that I actually show you how to do this sort of spinning stuff that I keep doing habitually and keep doing sometimes for a bit of extra impression, I'll admit, sometimes in videos. So, I'll go through some lessons. Now, we should start with the basics, of course. Now, before we try all of this sort of stuff and handovers, and I'm making up the names myself because I never went to the majorettes or anything, it's important, of course, to start with the basic turn, and it doesn't matter what kind of object you have. So I've got this little stick, a crowbar, favourite sword, and this, which is actually a magnet you're supposed to attach to a wall to hold tools up. But either way, you don't need a special majorette stick. In all the time I've ever had one, well, ever used one ever, it probably accounts a total of about 15 minutes, so you don't need one. You've probably got suitable objects lying around the house, so I'm going to go with my favourite sword. So, let's start with the basic turn. Now, a lot of people, when they're sort of in movies or just things like sword fighting, I notice they kind of do stuff like that. So, hand is closed, turning all the way around, exclusively using the wrist. Now, yeah, you can do that, but for the kind of spinning that I'm going to be teaching you, this is pretty much useless. When you're doing this, keeping the hand closed, you can't do any extra movements until you open the fingers of the hand. And to show that a bit closer, there's a difference between having this and this. And that is what I'm going to be showing now, in fact. We'll pop that out of the way. So, with that turn, quite simply, it's the same sort of thing as before. So starting to do this, like with the closed hand. All I'm doing is, I'm gripping exclusively with the thumb and the index finger. All the rest, you either completely ignore, or you can just use that as a sort of push. You're going to go like that, slap it a bit. So, not using those fingers at all, it looks like this. I'm just opening and keeping these fingers straight just to make it obvious to you, but really I'd probably just do it like that, just free, relaxed, the fingers are doing whatever, no inclusion whatsoever, they're just kind of relaxed, so they curl a bit. And the same, of course, backwards, it's exactly the same. So all of this, I'm just using my forearm, I'm using the wrist, I'm getting that movement going, but unlike closing the hand and doing this and sort of forcing myself, it's much easier, so it can actually travel almost like a windmill. So I'll show it straight. If I'm doing it like this, I'm notice how my sword's going off to the side quite a bit, because otherwise my wrist will hurt. Whereas when I do it open hand, it's now straight, fairly straight at least anyway. So that's why we need to start with that open hand. So we start with backwards and forwards. And again, this can be done at the end with something like this, like I'm doing with the sword. I'm holding it at the end on the handle, but the same thing is exactly identical if I had something like this and I'm holding it in the middle. I'm just going, same thing again, rotates, using the wrist and the forearm, and then I can start doing fancy things, like instead of going around this way, so starting to go with this sort of rotation, actually instead go inwards instead of outwards. So I can start doing that if it was closed hand, or this if it's open hand. Side angle. And with that, it means that I can start already with this sort of motion. So just by learning this alone, you've already learnt to do this particular action. So I'll go through a few of those and what you can do with a few different items to try to experiment with that. Again, it's important to start the basics. It might seem a bit boring at first, but that's the first step to getting into all of the fancy stuff that I just do habitually anyway. This was over years. We could probably make it down to a few weeks or so. So again, with the middle, there we are. Now, what I was mentioning earlier, you can use your hand, the actual fingers here, to help to sort of add a bit of a push. So instead of just doing this, open hand, free, not being involved, this time I'm going to use my middle finger, ring finger and little finger to basically just slap the item, sort of give it a push. Bit like if you're spinning a sort of a roundabout around, or you know, one of those little merry-go-round things, and then, you know, while it's still spinning, you sort of add a bit of a push to it and keep going and going and going. So with that, it starts to look like this. Should have another item, my crowbar. Again, I'd recommend starting with certain items that you don't mind potentially might break something, and in fact probably stay in an area, if when you're experimenting with new things, actually be in an area where there's nothing around that could get broken, that, you know, you don't mind, that you actually want to keep. I'm just doing this because I've done it for years now, and I always go back to my bedroom and try smaller items, or go out in the garden if I'm going to try something weird and experimental every time, because it gets unpredictable otherwise. So with this, again, when I'm doing the hand push, I'm just using those 3 fingers, so we'll do it slower. I'll show an inside hand view. So I'm using this, and I'm doing that push, and push again, and push again, and push again. And really, with how close the item is to your hand, and how hard to explain, how the actual item, where the item is in relation to your hand, normally it's very easy. You just pretty much almost are instinctively closing your hand, and that should catch it at some point. So you don't actually have to sort of focus on where it is. I mean, I'm not even going to use the camera to look at it. I'm just going by feel, and that's something that's going to be extremely important to this type of skill. At first, of course, you'll want to look at what your fingers are doing, where the item is, how far out or in it is around, all the bits and pieces like that. But really, for someone who's experienced, you should try your best to make it all go by muscle memory. So completely blindfolded, it's not just something that's impressive, you know, something I do to show off. It really is something where, to get competent, you have to do that anyway. You have to go by the feel, because otherwise, it's a bit like walking. If you try to watch every step you take and deliberately think about how you're going to place your feet, you're gonna look like a child, you know. It's that situation. You should just be able to look ahead at whatever else is going on and naturally do those actions and go entirely by the feel. That's what's happening here. So I'm doing this, going back and forth. So this is again just this type of motion outside, this type of motion inside. It's hard to repeat inside. Hang on. Let's try this one. Yeah, that's better. So this is repeating the motion on the inside. This is repeating the motion on the outside. And then all we have to do is just turn the hand back and forth, and I'm already doing this kind of spin. And certain items are better for this sort of spinning than others. You will notice, well, 3 out of 4 of my items are made of steel. Now that's not to show off that or to be crazy, that's because it helps. It's like I've tried doing some of these types of skills with pens and other lightweight items, even little sort of tubes and things made of plastic, and it's very easy. It's sort of, because you're giving that inertia suddenly to the item by starting the motion, it actually sort of wants to fly out of your hand, and it starts to become uncontrollable. And because, you know, lightweight items, it's like if you try to swing a lump of cardboard or foam around, you notice there's that sort of air resistance, and it starts to forcefully slow itself down. So items that are sort of bulky and lightweight really tend to fight against you when you try these sorts of spins. I mean, this is pretty much the limit of how lightweight you can get before it starts to fight against you. It's like, I mean, all these skills are really difficult if I tried it with something like the peacock feather that I've got in my bedroom, because it's so lightweight, and of course it's a feather, so it's dragging against the air. It ironically, although having a heavy item like this, you know, a couple of pounds in weight is pretty easy, having something like that, a feather, which is only a few grams, is really tiring and strenuous, because again, it's that momentum. Once you've started the first movement, just pushing forward with this, and then opening your hand, you can spin, catch, spin, catch, spin, catch. So almost all of this movement that's happening is just the momentum. I do a little bit of push, maybe out that far, so not even 90 degrees, in fact probably about 45 degrees if even that, and then the rest just spins around and I catch it again. And of course I can do things like I can add motion, almost like a steam engine I guess, with my arm, which actually can help the momentum. So I can start to go like that. I don't need to, because I can do momentum just with the wrist alone, and I only have to adapt the arm to help give me more room to spin. But all of this motion can be done with the help of the arm or with the wrist. But like I said, the heavier items keep the momentum. Obviously, there are going to be items too heavy where it's strenuous to spin them around. That you need to find for yourself. Obviously, different people have different strengths. Someone who's weaker will find themselves needing lighter items. People who are stronger will actually find themselves doing really well with heavier items. And again, you start to find a certain balance. I mean, this I personally find is pretty good. So this is a crowbar. It weighs about a couple of pounds. Same here with my favourite sword. So I'm spinning not in the middle, but around here. But it's balanced back close to the hilt. So it's a couple of pounds in weight, and in fact actually that feels lighter, so the crowbar might be about 3 pounds. So here it's very good, I can keep the momentum going, it's not too strenuous, it's very nice. And that's with a couple of pounds in weight for my strength. Find whatever items are ideal for your own personal strength, but again, don't be tempted just to go for small sort of sticks and things, especially softwood. They tend to be just sort of so lightweight and so, you know, sort of they drag on the air and has so much air resistance that they'll either try to fly out of your hand when you start that spin, or they'll just lose the momentum while you're spinning them. So going back to the spins, again, you can start to see various angles, and I'd recommend trying them. So I could start from back here, I'm doing exactly the same spin backwards, I can do the spin forwards, I can do the spin on the inside. You're trying to go backwards on that spin, it's not so fast. You'll notice inside spins tend not to be very good unless you're starting something. So maybe I'm going to do a spin like going wah. So I might start with a spin from the inside and then do the rest of the spin from there, which is, I'm adding the more advanced techniques, but that's why you would use that. But for your general spinning, just going around like this all the time, outside all the time, forever, whether it's backwards or forwards. Always easier, always useful. And then I can start to do other things like that. I just let go and let it catapult up. Again, practice a lot first before trying anything like that. And also you can spin it around, perhaps somewhere like here, which might help if you're tempted to sort of stare at it and watch what's happening. And I'm noticing, since you're probably quite a beginner, one thing I'd mention that might not be obvious is that a lot of my grip is happening with this particular knuckle of my index finger, and then this. Not the knuckle of the thumb, but the first joint. So it actually can be spun. You can spin from quite far out with your fingers. You can spin with the weapon or item that you've got absolutely tight against your hand, and different spins and different tricks you'll try will use different ones. That's your choice. But just generally, the actual spin like this or like this, all of the grip that I'm doing is happening between that joint of the thumb and the knuckle of my index finger. So I can do all of this all day long. I can do it in the middle, I can do it towards the end, I can do various items, and then start to lead on to other tricks. And it's very important that you use that type of spin, maybe starting from somewhere like here on your shoulder, or just starting straight out like this, and then you start the momentum. And this is good. When you start to build up momentum, that's when you can lead to other tricks, which I'll show you later. See you later.